much longer can US President Joe Biden go on? Because he's now, without doubt, in serious mental decline. This is from a speech to union bosses just last week.
And Don Finn, IBW, and Robert Reiter, R-E-I-T-E-R, You know, if I can digress for just a second, last night I was on the television. I was on the telephone, you know. At any rate, also we've got state leadership here, Lieutenant Governor Julius here, Stratton, and I'm from Pennsylvania. The Illinois President Don Harmon, State Senator Laura Murphy, State Rep Martin Moylan, and we got great labor leaders here too.
And I've shown you plenty of early examples in other shows that suggest to me that Biden's going to struggle to serve out the rest of his 3.5-year term. But what makes this leadership crisis in the US worse is that the Vice President, Kamala Harris, is not just desperately inexperienced, never been governor of a state, for instance, but she's unfit to ever replace Biden as president, so it seems to me. And it's not just that when she's faced with a problem, she laughs nervously and steps back, not leans forward into it. For instance, Joe Biden tasked Harris to stop the huge inflow of illegal immigrants coming over the Mexican border. And Harris back then talked big about what she'd do.
I look forward to engaging in diplomacy with government.
But since then, Harris has visited the Mexican president just once to discuss this, and eventually, when she was shamed into it, visited the border too, but just once. And again, that nervous laugh whenever she's asked if she'll go again.
Plans to visit the border?
Not today, but I have before, and I'm sure I will again.
And here's a sign of how far Harris will run from a problem. Last Friday, Biden had top officials go to Mexico City to discuss this border crisis with Mexico. It was a top team, the Secretary of State, the Homeland Security Secretary, and the Attorney General. But no Kamala Harris, the border czar. She was instead out playing with children back home to soften her image.
What number? Comes after 7, comes...
What comes after 7?
Comes... 8! Yes!
Joining me a short while ago was Sky News US correspondent Annelise Nielsen.
Yeah, look, Andrew, I mean, this is a discussion that it does fall down party lines in the US, that it's really Republicans who say, look, we're really concerned about his mental state, and they repeat many of his gaffes. He was known for that before he went into office, but it does seem like there has been continuing issues with that. The Democrats say, look, he has a stutter, we know that, and they say, look, we prefer him to Donald Trump, and so we'd rather this kind of approach than what we had before. But from just an outsider's view looking in, having watched for his first year in office almost, what we're seeing is that there are these repeated issues. I mean, when you've got the president forgetting our Prime Minister's name at the time of making such a significant announcement, calling him that fella down under, it's hard to think that he really could be that keyed into what exactly he was talking about. At the same time, the Australians who were in that meeting were telling us, no, he's so switched on, he's so sharp, he absolutely knew exactly everything going on. Just all across it. But of course they have to say that. They can't come out and say, look, he doesn't know what he's talking about. We've done this deal with everyone else in the administration. And this is where we're seeing a lot of this really progressive stuff come out, because it looks like it is other people in his administration. So I have to say, for someone watching this day in, day out, it's not something to discount. There is a very real possibility that this could decline quickly. We do know he's quite advanced in age, and that doesn't mean that it precludes you from doing the job, but there's definitely at least a bit of cause for concern among the general populace.
It's interesting. I actually wonder whether he can complete his term. To me, the mental decline, I mean, you're quite right, at times it's quite lucid, but other times it clearly is something's not right. I wonder whether he would have to step down. If he did, Kamala Harris, the Vice President, would have to take his place. But what I find really curious is that she does not seem to be trusted by this administration to do anything substantial, or maybe she's not willing to take responsibility. For instance, she was told that she was the administration's point person for the border crisis. She's only been down to the border once to try to stem all these this problem of mass immigration. And she wasn't there in Mexico City last Friday when top administration officials were meeting with the Mexican government to try to deal with this very crisis. What do you make of what's going on with Kamala Harris?
Well, it is interesting. We haven't seen her have as much of a public profile in the last few months that we saw at the very beginning of the administration. There's still those photo opportunities put out by her team of her meeting with the president in those meetings. They have their lunch every Friday, but what we aren't seeing is her speaking out on those really critical issues. Now, her office was even briefing around the time that she was appointed border czar that she wasn't actually appointed border czar at all. Her office was saying, no, she's in charge of dealing with the migrants once they get to America and looking at that end of things. It wasn't her job to stem the flow of migrants. That seemed to be quite counter to what the administration was saying. And so it seems like they're trying to pick the more attractive parts of that problem to talk to her base. What we are seeing too is that she doesn't want anything to do with the Afghanistan withdrawal, because there's going to be questions, as there would be for any presidential candidate, how would they act as commander-in-chief? And so she doesn't want to wear the decisions made by Joe Biden, especially as we can see they're not polling very well. So for her, it's kind of a lose-lose prospect. If you get your hands too dirty at this point, what are you going to gain? And if she is going to be running in the primaries, because there's no guarantee if Joe Biden does serve out his term as he intends to, that she would get any kind of advantage in that race. So this is why they're putting their head down, and they've also been trying to stem a lot of leaks from her office. There's been a lot of bad news stories in the US press where they've reported what they've said has come from her office, and so they don't want to be attached to that either.
Gee, there seems to be a real leadership crisis in Washington at the moment. We shall see how that plays out. Annelise Nielsen, thanks for your time.